Hi everyone, in this tutorial we're going to see how to create animated patterns in After Effects. A pattern is a composition of elements repeated at any type of regular intervals, but in this video we'll focus on a traditional two-axis grid. So, even a simple grid of rows and columns is a pattern. The problem is that this is visually very boring because we can see the structure behind. We can start to add complexity by crossing the alignment between rows and columns, but to make it really interesting we need to overlap the elements, making it even harder to distinguish their boundaries. Thanks very much to Motion Array for sponsoring this video. If you are a designer or a video maker, Motion Array is an amazing tool to make your workflow easier and faster. For my animation experiment, I want to start with an illustration from William Morris, who was the goat of pattern art. Now I need to clean the repeated modules to keep only the base and remove the black background. Okay, now we see a problem because the basic module was overlapped with itself and it lost some part, so we need to reconstruct it. Since the artwork has this very nice grain on it, I don't want to use a brush with flat color to recolor it, and instead it's better if I copy and paste pieces of the colored areas. Then I had to organize and rename all the layers, but I didn't record that part because it was the most boring job ever. So let's skip to After Effects, where I imported all the cleaned up and organized layer. The layers have a precise order, so now I need to put some colors to have an idea of the hierarchy of the flowers so that I can parent them correctly. After defining the first groups and relationship, I can start animating them, but nothing crazy here. I just want to give a very subtle movement, like the flowers are moved by the wind. So I'm just setting a very slight rotation on each layer that moves in a loop. Then I need to repeat the process for every single element while being careful to respect the overall structure, so that every leaf and flower is attached to the correct branch. But the animation is always the same, just a slight rotation applied to every element with some offset between each other. I'm time-lapsing this part because it's really basic. Okay, now that we have our basic module animated, we can finally see how to create an animated pattern. We just need to create a new composition with our base module inside. Then duplicate the module and split it into vertical halves. And bring each one of these halves to the opposite part of the composition. You can use the Align panel to match them perfectly to the side. As you can see, our composition is too big because it leaves a lot of empty space between the two halves, but we need them to be overlapped to hide the start and the end of every module. So let's change the composition size. I will say the half of it, so in my case it's 800 pixels. And move again the two halves to match the sides of the composition. And we can already see how the borders of our module are already quite hard to see. Anyway, our animation is now seamless horizontally, but it needs to work on both axes, so let's pre-comp everything a second time, and in this new composition we can repeat the same process but vertically. So, duplicate the subject and cut it in half. Bring the upper half down and the lower half up. As before, there is too much space between them, so let's decrease the height of our composition. And we have created our base module. Now we can bring it into any scene or composition and simply apply the effect CC Repeatile, which repeat the composition on the horizontal and vertical axes. You just need to increase the value of every side. Now I want to use the same technique to create a new pattern, but with a completely different aesthetic. So I want to try this technique I had in mind from some time to bring the effect 3D Inflate from Adobe Illustrator inside After Effects. First, a big thank you to Motion Array, who is sponsoring this video. Motion Array is a platform with the purpose of helping motion designer, video editor, graphic designer and creatives in general to work better and faster. They have a huge library with footage, templates and graphics, but I think that more than the quantity is more important the quality, and Motion Array assets are, in my opinion, extremely well made. Also, they have a new feature called Motion Array Plugins, which is a library for After Effects with more than 50 plugins, with more to come, ready to be used in any of your projects. You can do green screen, color correction, add layer style effects and a bunch of other action that are way faster than doing it by hand using the native tools. So check out motionarray.com and check out the new plugins library. Also, in this video description you can find a link to have a $50 discount on your annual subscription plan. Okay, now I want to try a very particular technique that basically consists in animating frame by frame inside Adobe Illustrator. It can seem weird or stupid, but wait a minute, because every software has particular functions that are not available in the others. So sometimes it's fun and even useful to try mixing them, and maybe I'll even do a video about it in the future. Anyway, I want to create a wave shape that will be my flower branch in After Effects. And I want to create an illustration of two waves, and I'm using the Illustrator Blend tool to create a bunch of interpolation of these two waves. As you can see, even if I only need a single stroke wave, I created a close shape, because with the close shape I can use the knife tool and cut very quickly with just a couple of clicks the part of the shape that I do not need. Okay, now I need to clean it a little bit. And then I need to bring every different shape on a different layer. This may seem a very long and tedious process, but actually took me just a few minutes. And at the end I have one layer for every frame of my wave. Now I can select them all together, change the stroke thickness, the color, and apply to the first layer the 3D inflate effect. And now I can find the correct values for the look I want. Okay, now that I found them, I can select all the remaining lines and apply the 3D inflate also to them. Okay, now I imported the Illustrator file in After Effects and basically the wave animation is already done. I just need to set every layer to a duration of 1 frame, then go to Animation, Keyframe Assistant and put them in a sequence. I want to repeat this frame animation process on Illustrator a second time to create a leaf that seems to rotate on itself. So again, blend tool, recolor and set all the layers. And I also want one flower to put on the top of the branch. Okay, now I can import these new two elements inside After Effects. I need to coordinate them with the movement of my waving branch, so it's just some keyframe on the position and the rotation. Before, we used the system of cutting vertically, pre-composing and then cutting horizontally. That was just to understand the principle of creating the base module of the pattern, but now I want to use an easier and quicker method. We can just move the subject to the side and then use the anchor point tool to set a spatial reference in the corner of the composition. Then we can duplicate it and repeat it on the opposite horizontal side, using the anchor tool as a guide to hit the right position. Now that the subject is modular horizontally, we can duplicate the two layers again and move them also to the opposite vertical side. If the composition is too narrow, is it possible that the halves touch the border on both sides? So that will create a cut in the pattern. And to solve this, we can simply move the anchor point, duplicate it again, and move it again back to the other side. And we will simply have a double overlap. If we go to our main composition where we have the base module repeated, we see that it works, but this module is way too simple, and the repetition is very clearly a boring 2-axis grid. To fix that and create more complexity, we can just get back into our module, duplicate the subject to create a second layer with a different position, for example, to push a more diagonal composition. So we just repeat the process and duplicate, move to the opposite vertical side, duplicate them both, and move them to the opposite horizontal side. Again, the comp is too narrow and one of our halves touch also the opposite corner, so we just need to move the anchor point, duplicate it again, and move them back to the opposite side. Okay, now the pattern is way more visually interesting, but I also want a little bit more of movement variation, so I'll just offset a little bit the second group of layers to have them move slightly after the first. Thanks very much for watching the video. Thanks to Motion Array for sponsoring it. Please check the link in the description to save $50 on your annual Motion Array subscription. Also, subscribe to the channel and please let me know in the comments if there's some topic you would like to see a video about. Thank you very much again and bye.